The wind howled across the desolate plains like a dying beast, dragging whispers of dust and ghosts through the small, forgotten town of Duskwater. It was the kind of place where the sun itself seemed reluctant to rise, and when it did, it burned everything it touched, souls included. Near the edge of the town stood a lonely ranch, its fences half fallen, its barn groaning with age. Inside, a man sat in silence, his fingers trembling around a half-empty bottle of whiskey. His name was Silas Crowe, a rancher by trade, but lately, something darker had settled in his eyes, something the whiskey couldn't drown. Outside, the creak of a saddle and the distant clop of hooves shattered the quiet. Silas froze. He knew that sound, slow, deliberate, heavy. Whoever rode that horse wasn't passing through. They were coming for him. He stood up, grabbed his Colt from the table, and peered through the cracked window. The rider appeared through the dust, tall, broad, and wearing a long black duster that trailed like smoke behind him. His hat was pulled low, hiding his face, but Silas didn't need to see it to know who it was. Every man in Duskwater had heard the stories. Some said he was a bounty hunter. Others swore he was the devil himself. They called him Elias Vane. Silas stepped out onto the porch, the wooden boards creaking beneath his boots. The rider stopped a few paces away and lifted his head. The light caught his face just enough for Silas to see the eyes, cold, gray, and dead as winter stone. Elias dismounted slowly, tying his horse to the post with a patience that chilled the air. "Silas Crowe," he said, his voice low and calm like a preacher's at a funeral. "You've been a hard man to find." Silas swallowed hard, trying to steady his hand as he aimed the gun. "Didn't mean to be found," he rasped. "You can turn that horse around and pretend you never came here." Elias smiled, a ghost of a grin, cruel and knowing. "You and I both know it doesn't work that way. You took something that wasn't yours." Silas clenched his jaw. The memory came back like a knife twisting in his gut. A card game gone wrong in a saloon 3 towns over. A pile of gold, a desperate hand, and a man who wouldn't fold. Silas hadn't meant to kill him. It was supposed to be a warning shot, but luck had run out for both of them that night. The man's name was Jeremiah Vane, Elias's brother. "You want justice?" Silas said, lowering his gun slightly. "I didn't mean for it to happen." "I swear it," Elias's eyes flickered. "Then make your peace." The silence between them was suffocating. The wind carried the smell of dust and blood, the scent of fate coming due. Silas felt his heart hammering. He looked up at the sky, the same sky he'd worked under his whole life, and whispered, "Please, just make it quick." Elias stepped forward, his boots crunching on the dirt. He stopped inches from Silas, close enough for the rancher to see the faint scar across his jaw. "Quick?" Elias said softly. "No, Crow, you took slow from me when you pulled that trigger." The click of a hammer echoed like thunder. Silas's hand twitched, but before he could draw, Elias struck, one shot clean and sharp. The bullet tore through the air and slammed into Silas's shoulder, spinning him to the ground. Pain exploded through his chest as he gasped, staring up at the man who loomed over him like death itself. "I ain't here for revenge," Elias said, holstering his gun. "I'm here for truth." He crouched beside Silas, his voice cold as stone. "Why'd you kill him?" Blood trickled down Silas's arm as he gritted his teeth. "Because he cheated," he spat. "He drew first. I just drew faster." Elias studied him for a long moment, then nodded slightly. "That sounds like Jeremiah." He stood up, turning his back. For a fleeting second, Silas thought it was over. He thought maybe Mercy wasn't dead after all. But then Elias stopped at the door and said without turning, "You'll ride with me to Clearwater. Sheriff will decide if you hang." Silas tried to stand, clutching his shoulder, pain burning through him like fire. "If you take me back, they'll lynch me before we get there." "Then you better pray faster than they rope," Elias said, mounting his horse. By the time the sun began to sink, they were miles out of Duskwater. 2 riders crossing a wasteland of rust-red rock and dying sage. The air was heavy with heat and silence. Silas's wound throbbed, but Elias didn't slow. Not once. Every time Silas looked over, those gray eyes were fixed ahead, empty, relentless. As night fell, they stopped by a dried creek bed. Elias built a small fire while Silas sat against a rock, clutching his bleeding arm. "You ever wonder," Silas muttered, staring into the flames, "if the devil walks among us?" Elias's jaw tightened. "He does. I've seen his face." Silas looked up, eyes hollow. "What's he look like?" Elias stared into the fire for a long while before answering. Looks like a man who killed his own brother because he couldn't forgive him. Silas froze. The words sank like stones into his chest. He understood then. Elias wasn't hunting for justice. He was hunting for himself. Every man he chased, every bullet he fired, it wasn't redemption he sought. It was punishment. Hours passed. Coyotes howled in the distance and the fire burned low. Silas dozed, haunted by the sound of that single gunshot over and over again. When he woke, dawn was just breaking, a crimson line on the horizon. Elias was gone. His horse tracks led toward the ridge. For a brief, desperate moment, Silas thought of running. Freedom was just a heartbeat away. But when he stood, he saw it, a shadow moving along the ridge above him. Elias was watching, always watching. They rode again, wordless through the Badlands. The sun climbed higher, and Silas felt his strength slipping. He could barely keep his horse steady when they reached an old ghost town. The wind moaned through the empty buildings like lost souls. Elias stopped in front of an abandoned church. "We rest here," he said. Inside, the air was cool and filled with dust. The broken altar stood in the middle, draped in cobwebs. Silas looked around and muttered, "Fitting place for judgment." Elias didn't answer. He sat on a pew, head bowed as if in prayer. "You ever regret it?" Silas asked after a while. "All this killing? All this chasing ghosts?" Elias looked up, his eyes glinting in the dim light. "Every day." Silas nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time you stop." Elias stood, walked over, and pressed a revolver into Silas's hand. "Then do it, end it. You've got your chance." Silas looked at the gun, confused. "What's this?" "Your choice," Elias said softly. "You can ride away. Or you can pull that trigger. Either way, one of us finds peace today." The weight of the revolver felt unbearable. Silas's mind raced. Could he kill this man? Could he live with himself if he didn't? The world seemed to hold its breath. Then, slowly, Silas dropped the gun. "No," he whispered. "I've spilled enough blood." Elias looked at him for a long time. Then, for the first time, something human flickered in his eyes. Grief. He nodded once, turned, and walked out into the morning light. Silas followed, squinting at the rising sun. But as he stepped outside, he froze. A dozen riders were approaching fast, men from Clearwater, their badges glinting. The sheriff's voice rang out, "Crowe, drop your weapon!" Elias didn't move. He stood there silent as the lawmen surrounded them. Silas realized too late what was happening. "No," he shouted. "He's not." Gunfire exploded. When the dust cleared, Elias was on the ground, a crimson stain spreading beneath him. The sheriff approached cautiously, then frowned. Who was he? Silas knelt beside the fallen man. "Nobody," he said quietly. "Just a man trying to make things right." He took Elias's hat, placed it over his chest, and whispered, "Guess you found your peace after all." As the sun climbed higher, Silas looked to the horizon. For the first time in years, he felt the weight lift. Just a little. The wind carried a whisper through the empty town like a farewell. He mounted his horse and rode toward the rising light, leaving the devil's stare behind forever.